Trevor here. Fear. Yeah, I got Jason here. JC. Then it's me, Rebirth of the Word. We love ancient history. We love learning about our traditional oral stories. So go ahead, JC. You go first. Spill the beans. Who are you, brother?
Oh gosh. Okay, so I'm a retired engineer a couple of times over. I would describe myself as a truth seeker, and one of my passions is ancient history. One of my passions is megalithic structures, religions, past, learning from our past, and it's a great enigma, our past. So, me being a truth seeker, and with my background and some of my right on. Some of my experience that I've had, most of my experience through my life has has garnered me the ability to um, not only scientifically but as kind of like a sleuth to use not only scientific means but detective type means or analyzing information and trying to establish a truth where in the end my truth will only be, no matter how good it is, will only be a theory. So trying to get as close to the truth as possible. I think that's what my goal is here, in this little forum that we're creating. I think that yeah, I think that with the minds that we've gathered, we should be able to get a little bit closer to maybe maybe not enlightenment or the whole truth, but maybe narrow down some of the things that make the truth what it is, and for what we can see it. And that's my take on it. That's why I'm here.
Yo, I love it, bro. I love it. We got the
Right on.
expert over here, JC. Now it's your turn, Trevor. Come on.
Oh, come on, man. That's a hard one to follow up on. Come on. We got the pro right there. um, I don't know. I'm jack of all trades, master of none. If you name it, I've had my hands on it pretty much. That and I love playing guitar. I'm an ex-musician. Used to tour a lot. Played shows here and there. You know how it goes. But yeah, I'm an engineer, a carpenter, and a stonemason, and but I have just a love for megalithic structures and like trying to figure out how they're all put together, especially like the pyramids in Egypt, other structures like in Mesoamerica and like in Turkey, all sorts of structures. Like I want to go to Mecca for like just for that. It's supposed to be the hub of civilization. Go figure it out how they carved that big temple in the side of a mountain.
Right, right.
It just stuff like that blows my mind. Like how humanity is tied to these civilizations tied to these megalithic structures or these key points around the world. How are we all tied to that? Like where do the gods come from? Like who were they? There were multiple ones. Like so, we gotta deconstruct the gods. Um, how we're all tied to it, universal, like whether it be through consciousness or like universal consciousness, or if it's God, it's like not so much in physical form, but maybe just in essence, the spirit, the Holy Spirit. um, but yeah, trying to figure out how we're all tied to it.
Right on, right on. So I gotta say, man, I'm glad that I met you guys, and I'm gonna be honest with you. I've told you guys this plenty. I've been looking for people to have these discussions with. I mean, we're all at an age where we want to know more. We don't care about
Yeah, absolutely.
right. We just want to know where the information so we can research it for ourselves, basically. You know what I mean? You know, it's good to find people who are genuine about what they want to learn because y'all been in spaces plenty of times where you heard somebody say, "Hey, go research this." One setting sayings that I hate the most is when people say, "Go do your own research." Motherfucker, I did about 30,000 hours of fucking research. What do you want me to do? You know what I mean? So I'm asking you as an individual, show me where to find where you learned it at.
I can report a little bit of intro here to the subject that we're doing. So today's topic, we're introducing ourselves and trying to we're going to describe the necessary parameters of an actual civilization. The word civilization, what it means, how we relate to it, and describe some of the strictest of these points in a little more detail. And you know, I think geographically around the world, a lot of definitions of the word the civilization and the meaning or the parameters of what one is required to have to define a civilization. I think if we work in a broad spectrum and kind of utilize the similarities and the necessary things that are incorporated into a society to be proclaimed as a system, as a civilization, not a society. Excuse me.
Right.
So, um, you know, a civilization, in my opinion, is the pinnacle of human development. So, I don't mean that in the sense that we won't stop growing, because we'll always continue to grow. Our civilization will always continue to grow. But I think once we reach that precipice of, you know, villager, townsfolk to city dwellers, and then when we reach this point of no return, where it's now everything has changed to a civilization. It's not, you can't be considered a small group of people and as separated or individualized people. Now it needs to be considered this civilization, this broad group of people, where, you know, your view actually comes out, expands outward to see the civilization. And I think that's going to be one of the core focuses of today, anyway, is to get us a baseline or uh, a control, if you will, to what we talk about in the future when we talk about ancient civilizations or modern civilizations or postmodern civilizations. You know, like so we have civilization when we reach the 50s after multiple world wars. I think our civilization it exchanged to this new and more dynamic civilizations where, you know, now we have a postmodern civilization, still modern, but, you know, we don't live in that civilization anymore. We have technologized, we have corporatized, we have you know, we politicized, and, you know, we've grown as a civilization, but, you know, we have a past civilization, but together they're both considered a civilization. They meet all the parameters. I think our discussion today should be, what are those parameters, and how do we define, um, from the smallest and most unique civilizations, maybe the ones on the fringe of actually being considered a civilization, do they meet enough requirements? If they don't even have all of the requirements, you know, do they meet enough of them to be considered a civilization for us to talk about in the ancient sense, the modern sense, postmodern sense, or future sense? So I'd like to just, that being a preface for our conversation today, maybe we can begin with some of the ideas that you guys have. I have I have a lot written down and a lot of ideas. Um, so I'll give you some bullet points of my own ideas just to start while I'm already talking. I think that, let me see here. Okay, so I think we have some significant features in classifying ancient civilizations. And some of these are, like I mentioned before, geographic location. I think that most civilizations, and I'll just briefly synapse my bullet point. Most civilizations, they tend to gather around resources: water, forests, food, land for or cultivation, things like these. They're parameters that must be met to to support even the smallest civilization. You're going to need sustainable resources. So I think this is going to be one of the very obvious ones. Also, a socio-political organization. So this is the establishment of governance, of laws, of police, of firemen, of, you know, things that protect the town, the city, the village. You know, these things must grow exponentially when the populace grows. So now we need organization of these things: schooling, public office, you know, people that make the laws, people that enforce the laws, to co to co to cohort to co coalize, cohesilize. I don't know the word. to make the
Cohabitate.
civilization cohesive, and to gel,
Cohabitate.
and to even though it's an entity that grows and moves and expands. It's not a solid thing. There still has to be that cellulose that holds it together, the society together. And you think that's our socio-political organizations. Just to name another one, maybe technological advancements. And what I mean by that is, we can expand on this further, but when we develop tools and we develop things that help us to sustain a larger portion of the populace, to sustain this quote unquote civilization. um, our technology needs to, like in war, which is a great example, or a horrible one, as you may know. um, you know we develop and technologies very rapidly for the sheer sake of necessity, for fight or flight, or offense defense, very structured things. In the past, I think technology was used the same way. There was a need to support a lot of people, so the ingenuity that develops this technology is a necessity for civilization. You have to have this. You have to have forward-looking people that are making things that help to sustain this civilization. So, I mean, I'll end there. I have about 8 or 9 more points, but as we progress through the conversation, and we'll let you guys talk, and we'll. I think that's a good jump-off point for us. Establishing a parameters for, actually creating a control when us as a group here, when we say, civilization, when we have this good, we refer back to episode 1. Refer back to episode 1. So, I mean, if you guys want to add or elaborate on a couple of these ideas, it'd be great.
You want to go, Trevor, or you want me to go ahead and go?
I was thinking like the number and size of what it takes to actually make a civilization, because you can have a small group of people, like small numbers, and still be able to like survive, like thrive.
Go ahead. Sorry. Trying to mute. I don't know how to mute. Oh.
No, but you can have a small number of group of people and still be able to thrive and survive. I mean, it doesn't take that much to be a civilization, but just as long as you have, like, you're coercively working together, it doesn't matter what tribe that you're in, or like even like intertribal, like, just call it interspecies mixing, you know. But yeah,
So size, so the actual, like the I think I think you're right. I think that's one determining factor of a civilization. You have to cap some sort of number of people there. There. I mean, I'm sure that would be gray area. Like I said, geologically, that if you're in a valley, and that valley is only 2 miles wide, you're only going to be able to support maybe 10,000, 20,000 people in that geographical location, even if there's resources like wood, water, animals, even farmland. That's going to restrict the size. But does it negate it being a civilization? Or mountaintop civilizations, where they were spread over maybe 100 miles, but it's, even though it's a long expanse, I think there was enough people there to keep that, to make it a civilization. So I think you're right. I think a determining factor should be size. It should be the the census. So yeah, I agree with you. Sorry to interrupt you too. Go ahead, man.
No,
you're
that's.
good.
I love the dialogue. I love the dialogue, and it's interesting because I have a question for you, both of you guys actually, because Trevor mentioned about size, and you, JC, mentioned about the food and the
How do I
location.
change my name? Go
And
ahead, food location. Go ahead. Yep, I'm listening.
you had different criteria. So when I look at the definition of civilization, I like to go back to the Sumerians, because the Sumerians are considered the first civilization, or at least the founders of the first civilization of their writing. So before you continue, Trevor, I want to ask you, according to Oxford University, a civilization is a stage of social development identified by the formation of organized communities and permanent settlements with oral or written records and history, traditions, religious faiths, laws, shared values, customs, beliefs, and artistic achievements. Do you agree? Do both of y'all agree with Oxford University with their definition of what a civilization is?
I can I can see a lot of it, like it draws into points, but there's not a whole bunch of that needed added on top of that either. You could knock a few of those things, like a good handful of those things off in each
Right.
category. Like,
Right.
but it's Oxford. They're gonna over exemplify it, or exemplify. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're gonna go overboard and trying to sound smart and civilized as possible, because we drink with our tea, with our pinky up, no offense to the English or the British over there.
So my opinion on Oxford Dictionary's definition of civilization, I think that, like Fear suggested, I think it's pretty just cut and dry explanation. It's very, very rigid and vanilla. It's just like, yeah, these are all points that can't be refuted. But I think that I think when you classify ancient civilizations, you have to do it with more of a holistic analysis. You kind of have to take into account various different things like um, uh, um, cultural contributions. Like let's say we find a civilization that's died out. How are we to classify that civilization? Do we have ranks of civilizations? Obviously we do. We have tiers, or we have the hierarchy of civilizations, ranking with Western and modern society at the peak of this, obviously, as we know it for now. But there's always that baseline, that big wide bottom that a lot of civilizations fit into, and I think if we take it more holistically, instead of with verbiage and with calculated um, definitions of what something may be to an academia, where something, it has to be able to be quantified, and it has to be it has to be a decisive wording that, even if refuted, still will stand. um, Whereas I think what we're doing here on this group, where we're trying to find out, we're trying to analyze something that's unfigure outable. The whatever answer we discover, unless we miraculously find some irrefutable proof of, I think that, we're all just shooting in the dark here, our own opinions. But I think us creating a baseline, like I described before, of what a civilization is to us three, what it is to us as we're communicating with each other, we kind of have a better understanding of the verbiage of civilization, not just it means this and this and this, but it could encompass much, much more, or it could just take one of those things, and it could be very expansive around that one idea, but still have like you were saying, you don't need all of these things to create a civilization. But I think for us as individuals in this forum now, that us discussing what is a civilization, what what is a definable aspect of a civilization that is translatable through, like I said, from very early civilizations to postmodern to modern to maybe, ideas or renditions or AI even of future civilization, because all that needs data. Right now, us exploring the ancient, we have the least amount of data. We're working with the least amount of proof. We're working with an unattainable facts, because they're long gone. They're either destroyed or forgotten, or oppressed. So yeah, again, sorry to be so long-winded, but hey, I think that our focus here today should be us really trying to hammer out the details of what we think a civilization, the parameters for describing and what a civilization is, from that point, whether it is a civilization or it's not quite a civilization. You know, I want to really define this line, because like if I say, there's this African tribe that they found a 45,000-year-old wooden carved piece that can be carbon dated, a carved statue with paint that has animal pigment in it that can be carbon dated, and these two correlate to that same date around 60, 70,000 years ago. But are we talking about a civilization, or are we just talking about an artifact from a tribe or a village, or on the broader scale now, Africa could be in its whole could be considered a civilization, even dotted with villages and small cities and towns, trading. There could be some aspects that you could say this whole country at one time, this whole continent, would be considered its civilization on its own. But I don't think that that's what we're trying to shoot for here on that grander mega scale, because then obviously the world has been a civilization since the dawn of man, or until dawn of intelligence. So we don't want to go that broad, but we still, I'm trying to get it down to like when in future episodes when we're talking about,
Oh,
the
come on, why
Sumerian
not?
civilization. Yeah. So anyway, like, yeah. So like cultural and intellectual contribution, I think, like art and music and um, policies and ideologies, I think those things don't develop. They don't develop in a civilization unless there's that freedom. You have to have some sort of release from, farming, hunting, cooking food, defending with a knife and a sword. You get this relaxed feeling once, and that's generational. It has to last for at least a while. I have to grow up as a child and raise my children with this sort of, I'm calling it freedom, but this sort of um, this relaxing of the constant pounding of nature, the constant pounding of Mother Nature, the weather, I need a home, the animals, I need a fence and some way to defend myself, invading neighbors, I need to. Once these things are established, I think you, men and man, I think, is able to explore their mind, or open their mind and explore some things like art and music, these things, literature, poetry, gazing at the stars. I think these things are these intellectual contributions that are, once you have successfully integrated this into your society, I think that society is now has one of the pillars of becoming a civilization, or being called a civilization, because now you have this culturing of ideas and these things that are able to be expanded upon or learned and passed along. um, not just skills. Here's how to make a fire, here's how to hunt for a deer, here's how to cook that deer, here's how to dry it, meat, what I mean. Besides these things, we get into more intellectual things like poetry and and experiencing culture like marriages and celebrations, holidays, things like that. So yeah, I'll hand it over to the guys here. I don't want to take up all the time.
No, but that's interesting because do you know who Margaret Mead is? The anthropologist. She's an okay. I said it wrong, man. I'm just like you guys right now. See my eyes. Was an anthropologist, right? And on my journey trying to figure out what a civilization is, because there's different criteria. We already talked about it. I wanted to understand from an anthropologist's perspective what a civilization is, right? Because you got engineering ideas, you have anthropologist ideas, you have religious ideas, you have so many different ideas from different professionals in different areas on what they consider a civilization. Like an engineer, correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, an engineer is not going to agree with an anthropologist of what a civilization is, because an engineer is going to look at what megalithic structures, right? And the anthropologist is going to look at the bone structure. And why I brought up the bone structure is because Margaret Mead believes that civilization started because of an what she found as a femur bone was broken, and it took somebody else from the kindness of their heart to help that person um, continue to live because of that broken bone. So it was more like is to help other individuals with their ideas, or not ideas, but to help other individuals survive. Like, we're considered animal species, so a lot of people will look at the animal species and say, well, if you're a wolf, if you're injured, they're going to leave you behind. Well, she took it as, and I'll read it right here because I brought it up because I always talk about Margaret Mead. She says that um, the first sign of civilization in an ancient culture is a femur that had been broken and then healed. She theorized that in the animal kingdom, if you break your leg, you die because you are unable to run from danger, hunt, and survive. But somebody
Mm-hmm.
took time out of their life to help somebody to the point where their bone healed. So that's where I got my idea of what a civilization is, because we mentioned different criteria. Trevor just mentioned it, like, there's different ways of what people would perceive as what a civilization, but that doesn't mean that that's the all right way, because if you look at Margaret Mead, the anthropologist, idea of the femur being healed, that gives you an idea. Okay, this person was civilized enough to say, hey, I have empathy for this person, I want to help this person survive out here in this kingdom, wild kingdom, I guess you can call it. You know what I mean? The animal kingdom, right?
Mm-hmm.
We did talk a lot of great things. I mean, I really enjoyed the ideas of what you guys consider civilization, because I don't think there's a right answer for it.
Yeah, and that's it. It's pretty, and my whole idea was to try to figure out more parameters. The Oxford description kind of is like an idea of some parameters, but I think that there's a lot more parameters that actually would fit into it. Governance, the rule of law, social cohesion and ethics, economic stability and sustainability, and education and intellectual development. I mean, I think, and technological advancements and ethical innovation. I think that
I think we could break it down a little bit, like break it down a little bit
yeah,
more than that. Just like
yeah,
instead of going overboard, just a civilization that you can like basically thrive off of. Um, Maintain your lands, thrive off of, have a trade. If you like the trade, have your physical trades, like what you can do, what your masters of, like whether it be weaving a fucking basket or making an axe out of a hammer and a stick, or whatever your trade is, and working the other trade, trading your goods with other local villages or whatnot. I mean, that right there is a civilization just working in itself and having its own
yeah. And that's what the Oxford
infrastructure.
Dictionary was talking about: the shared resources of communities. And that's what you're talking about, is multiple villages trading goods and services. One may live by the river, one may live in the farmland, one may live in the forest. They're going to trade wood, water, and wheat. That's how it
Yep.
goes. So yeah, I think you're right, and that's what I was talking about. Scale. What scale are we going to be looking at? What kind of, you know, that's where
Well,
the
if
topics
you're talking about
we're
like
talking about.
building megalithic structure, you're definitely gonna have like need a whole shit ton of people. At least like
Working cooperatively.
Yeah,
Yeah,
depending on how big that structure is gonna be, you're gonna need at least minimum 50,000 people.
yeah,
I can
yeah,
see that because I can see.
and even if, yeah, and even if a portion of them are forced labor or slaves, or military men, I think there's still a lot of intellectual cooperation that amongst the builders, or not the builders, but the engineers and architects of these structures. They have to be, you know, it's not always just one person. It's usually a head guy with like 10 subordinates that are either they're being mentored by this man or this artisan or this engineer, and he has all
Generational.
this help. Yes, he has all this help. Maybe his sons are involved, and their sons and his brothers. Maybe it's a, uh, but there has to be this organized. When we're talking about doing these megalithic structures, and placing them in civilizations, I think when a civilization reaches a certain point, they build these great monoliths, these structures that are meant to signify their age, their time, their coming, their advancement. Here is our trophy. This is who we are at this point. And I think that's been going on since the dawn of time. Whether it be religious statues, whether it be road markers, whether it be beacons, whether it be, star maps or waypoints or waylines. Go ahead, Reaver.
Oh no. I'm listening. Oh shoot! What the
Yeah.
heck? My skateboard.
So I think those megalithic structures, when we talk about them and we talk about civilization, I think when we find them, I think the point of civilization has already been established. I think this is. I don't think you have to have megalithic structures to have
I was just
a
making reference on that
civilization.
as into like
No.
what type of
Yes,
civilization is what I was going
yes,
for.
and that's where I was circling around to, right back to your point, is that we as truth seekers here now, we're having to look back. We can look at these monolithic uh, structures and try to figure out how they built them, what their mindset was when they were building them. And that helps us because, like I said in the preface, we don't have any information, or we have very little. So to see this structure, to be able to analyze it and figure it out and try to establish some reasons why they may have done it, will shed some light on the civilization that led up to the building of that. So I think you're right. It can I'd help identify the type of civilization, the amount of people by the size and sheer size of the structure, and grandeur, but also some places like that are very intricately done. They're not just massive, but they may not be as massive, but maybe they took just as long because of the artisanship that was required to either cut the stones or carve the intricate features. So yeah, you're right. These megalithic structures, or even just ancient structures, or how would I put that? Ruins. Some of these ruins will
Yep.
signify, hey, how big was this civilization? When did this civilization last? What was the key points of this civilization in their art, their music, their everyday mannerisms? Pictorials on the walls. What did they eat? How did they hunt? How did they? What can we see some of their technological advancements in that was inscribed on these giant structures, or was it just
Mm-hmm.
art? Was it just an artistic rendition, somebody's artistic idea?
It's
That's for
interesting.
us.
It's interesting because while you was talking, I looked online to look up the average amount of people that it takes to build a single home, right? And
Mhm.
according to NAHB, they say anywhere between 11 to 30 contractors are used to build a single home. Now, those subcontractors can have anywhere from one person to
To
50 people.
5, yeah, to
Yeah, exactly.
15,
To build one
yes,
single home. So just imagine if you have
hundreds of people.
exactly. So you have hundreds of people building a
To build
single,
a wooden frame structure that's only made to last 50 years.
if that,
Yeah.
if
So, yeah.
because
So
you have to
now we're
replace
talking.
your roof. You have to replace your roof every at least 15 to 20 years, depending on what type of roof you have. You know, my house that I live in right now,
Unless you have a steel beam structure,
and that's what I was going
then
to.
like
Yeah.
But then you have to worry about rust, though, too. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
There's always deterioration, no matter
Always
what you put.
deteriorating.
But
So
if you
yeah, but
find
you
them, if you're smart enough and you know the land and you know your surrounding, you can find the materials just by simple observation that would last the longest and be the
I'm
strongest.
so glad you said that. One of my favorite things is
you know what
ancient.
else you could do? You
I'm
know what
sorry.
else you could do? You could tar the end of the steel beams itself and then bury it into the ground. That way, it's not water damaged.
What's they call it?
Yeah.
It's a
Rust-Oleum
water.
that helps
Yeah.
with.
No, no, not that stuff. It's actual like you have to paint it on
It's a
it. It's like
galvanizing, it's a galvanizing material. Yeah.
I think I
Galvanized.
you
And what
just
it does is
those
it
things.
creates an actual rust that doesn't rust anymore, and that is like a candy coating on it. And you can stick it in the ground, but it's still, as a structural engineer, I can tell you there's a half life on a steel beam, even completely coated, that when
oh
it's
yeah,
in
yeah.
like buried or set in concrete, it has a half life of about 75 years. So anything less than that you don't do all that overkill, you're talking about a steel beam that's going to last 50 years. Most of our bridges and things that we have in our infrastructure today that we built 100 years ago, they're gone. The steel inside of them is all gone. Inside the concrete, there's just hollow tubes where rebar used to be. It's all gone. So you're
Yep.
crumbling and cracking. The half life is exceeded. It's on to the next half life, which is going to be utter deterioration. And I think the ancients, they had this engineering idea, and sorry I'll let you finish it. I know you don't forget your point, Rebirth, but I think these ancient engineers,
All
they
right.
they were really in tune, right on it. They were very in tune with their materials, the materials that they got to use. They knew the trees that they had to import if they had to, or their any fibrous materials that they were using to weave baskets, to make paper, to do. These are hundreds of years, generation after generation after generation of using these materials, cultivating these materials, working the kinks out, R&Ding them, using them for different purposes. The human mind is great. You can make rope out of what you make paper out of. You know what I mean? The human spirit is great like that. So take into consideration all that, bada bing. Okay, go ahead, Reverse. Sorry. I got off track.
No, I love it. If you guys want to interrupt me, I would not take offense to that because I know I have a brain injury, so sometimes I have to say what I say before I forget it. So if you guys are
Yeah,
the
all
same,
right.
you want to just cut me off, I would not take offense to that. I'm grown enough to know when somebody's trying to have a dialogue with me rather than trying to talk over me,
Yeah.
you know. So
Write notes. Keep your place.
and that's
Bookmark it.
and that's what I do. I write notes down too. But you know, everything has a life cycle. Everything, no matter what it is, whether it's metal, whether it's plastic, whether it's trees, whatever the case may be. Termites eat trees, wood, and all this other stuff. So we have everything deteriorates, and that's why it makes it the pyramids are so interesting to me because we don't exactly know how long they were built. We just know that we have theories of the idea. We have these hypotheses. We have, people coming up with their own conclusions based off their own research. But the problem that I think that happens is the most, and I think you mentioned this earlier, Trevor. You talked about the Peruvian pyramids, or I think it was Jason, one of you two talked about the pyramids in Peru. The ancient Egyptian pyramids are not the oldest pyramids, not by
They're just
far.
big. They're just big.
Everything starts small, right? Everything smart starts small. And when I mean by small, I mean by a prototype. We have prototypes. Nobody goes out and says, "Hey, I'm going to go build me a pyramid and have it
well,
300."
I can expand on your idea just a little bit real quick. Give me a minute. So the basic of a pyramid is, how did they know that shape's going to last? How did they know that that's the shape to build? How did they know that A pyramid is going to last forever. Well, you take a look around in nature. You have mountains. Okay, those have been there since, that mountain was there. Their great grandfather. There's stories about it, and it's been that shape. If you
Mountains.
take a if you take a handful of sand, just a handful of sand, and you pour it out slowly into a pile, it naturally creates a conical or pyramidical shape. Okay, that is natural. And if you were to take sand and with water form a cube and put it there, and you take dry sand with no water and put it there like I described in just its own free form from pouring it down from the top, and you let two sit, eventually the water will dry out from the square, the corners will start to crack, it will develop weight issues and structural issues and start to collapse on itself, and eventually will look like a pyramid. So it will naturally create its own shape, the best shape. So why did they create it? It's obvious. It's obvious. The pyramid is the actual the quintessential long lasting shape, natural shape. We talked the top down pyramid. Even even in ancient times, these symbols these symbols are symbols of the pyramid, but we symbolize them as life, as man and woman. We use the pyramidal shape for pretty much almost everything in engineering. You can fit a triangle or some Fibonacci formula into engineering. And I think these are all natural things, and they work the best because they're natural. So the pyramidal shape, ancient because it's easy. It's right. It's what people know. Go ahead. Ancient civilizations have left an indelible mark on human history, shaping our understanding of culture, society, and governance. Classifying these civilizations is a complex task, requires comprehensive examination of various factors. Our podcast explores the important features of classifying ancient civilization, delves deeper into one of the most profound civilizations, which is the Mesopotamians, the Egyptians, and so forth. These profound civilizations, which we'll be discussing further in future episodes,